Welcome back to On Texas Football, the weekly edition of Texas versus the SEC. And we got a good show for you today. Of course, Texas playing their first ever SEC game, Jerry. No better time to take a look at what's going else in the conference right now. Texas, again, starts conference play after this weekend. Every team in the SEC will have played at least one game, with a few doubling up already. We're going to take a deep look at the quarterbacks. Give ourselves, through 4 weeks, the top 5 SEC quarterbacks, how things are performing right now. We'll each have our own 5, and we'll talk about an honorable mention or maybe a guy that missed the cut a little bit right afterward. But Jerry, starting at number 5, I mean, who's your 5th guy? I think we're going to have pretty varying lists here. But start us off with number 5.
Yeah, so I went with Carson Beck, and maybe it's because so much was expected of Carson Beck. But he's been pretty good, 68.3 completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. But people saw he had a strong game against Clemson, but the people saw against Kentucky, maybe not the game that it was expected for a guy that was, one of the 3 Heisman front runners to start the season. So I do have Beck 5. Now, we'll see. He has a chance to move up on Saturday against Alabama. He's going to have to do it without London Humphreys, one of his top receivers, who's out with mono. Obviously, number 1 receiver, Ra Thomas, was already kicked off the team before the season. So he's down probably 2 of his top 4 or 5 receivers right now. But I have Carson Beck at 5.
I have the same. So starting 1 for 1 there, Jerry. I have Carson Beck for that exact same reason. His longest pass so far this year, 50 yards. And that's fine, right? But that's 13th among SEC quarterbacks in terms of longest, most explosive play this year. I think you're just missing the Ladd McConkey, the Brock Bowers. Obviously, Ra Thomas being dismissed from the team is like if Texas would have gone into this year expecting Isaiah Bond to be their guy, and he was, departed as well. So you see maybe that lack of passing offense, maybe in comparison to last year. I think that's standing out right now. Of course, he's not having a bad year, but you go back and you look at that Kentucky game thinking, okay, maybe there should have been a bit more. Number 4 is actually going to be, the biggest battle of quarterbacks that we'll see this week. And I have Jalen Milroe at 4. I've been impressed with them. I think at times you kind of take for granted the steps and development that he's taken at the quarterback position. Of course, you have guys like Jeremy Williams. You got guys like Ryan Williams running all over, Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams running all over the field at wide receiver. He's been impressive. What's going to stand out to him for me is, does that deep ball continue to show up week in and week out? So far, I have no reason to think not. But when teams start to really sit back those safeties and say, all right, check it down, throw those intermediate routes, is he able to do that? That's going to be a big test. I got Milroe at 4, Jerry.
We talked about it before the show. I'm throwing a curveball. I'm going Diego Pavia at 4. I've been thinking about it since you were talking, and I was going to have him my honorable mention guy, but I got to go with him at 4 because, I was thinking about it while you were talking about Milroe, and I was like, you know what? Vanderbilt wouldn't have beat Virginia Tech last year. Vanderbilt wouldn't have been in double overtime with Missouri on the road last year. Diego Pavia has come in, and he has completed 63.5%. 721 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, 279 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns. But against the 2 Power 5 teams, like 190 passing, 104 rushing. That was an upset. And 178 passing and 84 rushing on the road at Missouri last week. It's going to be hard to be first, second, or third team all SEC with the quarterbacks in this conference this year. But if he's not the most underrated quarterback going in college football right now, I don't know who is. He's giving Vanderbilt fans hope. Yeah. Again, it's been a long time since James Franklin left. That was the last time they had hope.
I was saying, Jerry, he might be the one starting up the golden era of Vanderbilt football. And who would have thought that it would be the case this year in 2024 with all of these quarterbacks that we're talking about right now? But here we are. And tip of the cap to him. He was electric, previously, and now carrying that over into the SEC. Very fun. Jerry, I'll let you go down the list to number 3, and I'll bounce back to me right after.
Yeah, so for 3, I was in between Milroe and Quinn because Quinn was injured. But I am going to go Milroe here right now. And I think Milroe's had a really good season, right? He's 67.3% completion. They've only played 3 games, 52 pass attempts in 3 games. Not a lot, though. They're relying on his running and the run game. But he's 590 yards, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. Obviously, 3 to 6 touchdowns, rushing 156 yards. if he has a big game and they beat Georgia, he may move to number 1 on our list next time we do this. But I think Jalen Milroe leadership. I think Kalen DeBoer is bringing him along in that scheme. You'll see more of him and more of him in the passing game as the season goes along. But I think Jalen Milroe is my number 3 guy. And again, it was tight between him and Quinn just because Quinn got hurt and missed the game.
Yeah, that's fair. And you threw a curveball earlier. I'm going to throw one right back to you. Talk about what could have been an honorable mention. I'm completely flipping my own brains in a mix right now. Garrett Nussmeier, the LSU quarterback, is going to be my number 3 right now. 160 passes through 4 games right now. It's the most in the SEC. Only 2 interceptions. I'll take that. 80 pass attempts to 1 interception ratio all day. 1,250 yards passing, and again, finding ways to move the football through the air. Originally, I kind of sat there and juggled with Nico. You go on the road, you get a big win as a redshirt freshman. That's great. It certainly helps when you have a top 5 rushing offense in your back pocket. So right now, I think Nussmeier is my guy at 3, which leads me to Quinn Ewers at 2. And again, that probably would have been in the conversation for number 1 had it not been a tremendous play so far this year by Jaxson Dart, but also Quinn getting dinged up. When I look at Quinn Ewers and what he's done so far this year, the statistics may not jump off the page. Obviously, he's been dinged up, but hey, you look at that Michigan game, I don't think that there's been a performance by an SEC quarterback that comes close to that right now. Again, Nico on the road against Oklahoma, that's a good win. He wasn't asked to do as much as what Quinn Ewers was in Ann Arbor. He's my number 2 quarterback right now in the SEC, and I think that can only go up whenever he returns from injury.
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunate he was hurt because he might have been my number 1 because I know he had the interception. I still think that might have had to do with the thumb against UTSA as much as, just kind of not having great footwork. I think he was in a little pain there with that thumb at the time. But he was headed for a, 32 of 40 for 400-yard game against UTSA. And if he hadn't got hurt in playing ULM, he'd probably be our number 1 guy right now. Yeah. But he's not. He is 2. I think the Michigan game, vintage Quinn, just that game showed his improvement too, and a big part of why he's 2 for me. He is playing better in the pocket this year. He's a more confident quarterback in the pocket. He is climbing the pocket and seeing down the field at a better, higher rate than he did a year ago. And that should be the natural maturation process that's in his 3rd year. But no doubt for me, Quinn's my number 2, which means we have the same number 1, CJ, Jaxson Dart. And we'll both talk about Dart, but here's my thing. It's hard to go against him. Now, he does have 2 interceptions this year, and they played 1 tough road game at Wake, not tough road game, at Power 4. It has been tough for some teams in the past, right? It was so not tough that Wake Forest canceled in the future. But Jaxson Dart's had 377 yards or more in every start this year. We'll see if the turnovers become an issue later in the season when their schedule gets more difficult. But right now, it's hard not to have him 1 just because of how he's performing on a week-in, week-out basis. I mean, 80% completion. I don't care who you're playing against. That is a massive number.
That's exactly why I was going with him, right? 1,550 yards through 4 games, 80% completion. That's a heck of a number. The statistics don't lie right now through 4 games. He probably, and I think you could toss it up with Cam Ward at Miami, the Heisman front runner through 4 weeks. Of course, Quinn's going to be in that conversation once he comes back. Do those 2 games that he sits out, knock him, we'll see. But he'll have his moments, obviously, with Oklahoma, Georgia, back-to-back, and then Texas A&M at the end of the year. If Texas keeps winning, they'll be in that race. And so speaking of Quinn and perhaps a hike to the Heisman, I mean, we just mentioned some really talented quarterbacks right there, Jerry, that are going to be tough competition for not only all SEC quarterbacks, but Player of the Year. And, of course, the Heisman Trophy, which kind of feels like it's become a quarterback award over the last decade or so. So of these quarterbacks, is it Jaxson Dart and Quinn out front to lose? Who of these quarterbacks in the Georgia-Alabama game is going to take a big leap? Could Nico or LSU Garrett Nussmeier, could they become big-time players? What's the big picture for the Heisman race among SEC quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think if Dart has a big game at home against Kentucky, him and Cam Ward may be sitting 1-2 unless Jalen Milroe does something spectacular and they beat Georgia. Now, if Milroe has a big game and they beat Georgia, he is going to vault up to either one or two. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I guess the same could be said for Carson Beck, but I think Georgia, the problem Beck's got is they're going to lean on the run game so much that could actually hurt him a little bit, because I think they're going to feed the ball to ETN, Nate Frazier, and try to run the football. Now, if I'm wrong and Beck throws for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, obviously, then he's going to vault up too. But the interesting thing is all those guys play each other. So it's all going to get sorted out. Quinn's the only guy that doesn't play Milroe and Dart. So it's all going to get it's sorted out. Thing for Quinn is Oklahoma and Georgia. He could vault right back to the top of this thing with 2 strong games and wins for the Longhorns in October 12th and 19th. But I do think if Milroe has a big game against Georgia and they beat Georgia, watch what the national attention becomes for him under Kalen DeBoer and being the Alabama quarterback. If he has a big game, he's going to vault to either 1 or 1B with Cam Ward. But I do think Jaxson Dart has a front-loaded schedule to put up monster numbers. So if they win enough games late against quality opponents, he's going to be there too.
Is there a path for Quinn to get to New York?
I do think there is, because you still have 2 rivalry games left, and you have the Georgia game. I honestly think it would help Quinn if Georgia beats Alabama and then Texas handles their business. It's in a 1-2 game in Austin. Both teams are undefeated, and Quinn has a big game against Georgia. If he has a game like Michigan, he did against Michigan, against Georgia in an undefeated scenario, watch him vault right back to the top. Quinn, Cam Ward's going to have statistically the best season, I think, in the ACC. But if Quinn has a good game against Oklahoma and then Georgia handles Alabama and then that meeting happens and Quinn has a big game and a win over Georgia, I think that's going to kind of start to take precedent there. And then you have the game at A&M to end the season. So he's got 3 opportunities. I'm not discounting that Arkansas, but from a national perspective, I don't think that'll be the same. He has 3 big games there. Now, we haven't mentioned Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter's starting to get some run. So all the quarterbacks in the SEC and Cam Ward, they have to watch what Travis Hunter does if he stays healthy the entire way for Colorado. When their games, they have a lot of difficult games coming up at Colorado. Does he perform really at a high level, make it through the season healthy, which he didn't do last year, playing as many snaps as he does? If he does, then he's going to factor in.
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit. I know that we're talking about SEC quarterbacks, but you did mention it feels like Cam Ward's going to be that guy in the ACC that puts up the gaudy numbers and, certainly puts himself in a position to make it to New York. I'm going to throw a name at you, and just real quick, are we buying or selling? Because I'm going to ask you to buy or sell some teams in terms of what their chances are for the SEC here in a bit. Cade Klubnik. Is Clemson a team that can put up as many points as they have been over the last 2 weeks? And, their schedule, Jerry, I think Clemson and Miami, they're both on a fast track to meeting in the ACC championship game. They run the table in the regular season now. Is that a guy that could sneak into New York?
It'll be interesting. I don't think the ACC is going to get the love is the problem. Cam Ward had his big game against Florida, which doesn't look as big now, but it's a big game. That was a first weekend, big stage. Klubnik and Clemson did not look competitive against Georgia. That's going to hurt them. I guess if maybe they beat Miami as a massive game, but I'm not sure if the votes aren't already in by that point. So I don't see it. I'm going to sell that.
Okay. Well, perfect. And then again, that it's a great little appetizer for the main dish. And of course, long way to go in this season. But Jerry, to finish this video off, and again, thank you everybody for sticking around. Make sure to come follow us on ontexasfootball.com. Join the community. Get all the nuggets from Jerry on the recruiting trail. And of course, some team tidbits from Bobby Burton, Rod Babers, and myself and Blake Monroe. So, Jerry, as we talk about the SEC, and it kicks off fully for everybody this week. Well, that leads the question to who's going to be in Atlanta come December to play for the national championship, or the SEC championship. I did want to ask you to buy or sell a few teams right now in terms of their true legit contenderness, if you will, for the SEC. I'll start with LSU. Is there a shot that LSU and Brian Kelly rights the ship and they find a way to Atlanta?
Sell.
Sell. I'm right there with you. Tennessee. Go on the road, start off pretty hot against Oklahoma, got a young quarterback, but a good running game.
I'll buy them as having a chance.
Okay.
I'll buy that. Sell. Look, I like Brady Cook. I like their team. They have a really good schedule. I just don't think they look like a team that's going to make it through an easy schedule. I think it looks like a team that's going to lose a couple of road games on the best schedule in the SEC for the teams that ranked high. So I'm selling that one.
All right, now it's kind of pick or choose, right? Alabama, Georgia. Is it the winner of this game has a front, a fast pace to the championship game? Is that what you're looking at?
I am, actually, because Georgia, if they lose this game, they still have road games at Texas and at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not – and Tennessee comes to their house. So if Georgia loses this game, chances are they lose another. So this game, I think right now I'm kind of buying 4 teams that have a chance. But if Georgia loses this game, I think they're going to be up against it a little bit to make the SEC championship. So I guess that means I got to pick an Alabama-Georgia winner. I'm going to go sell.
Okay, well, there we go. I did want to follow up with Georgia. Is it that lack of a passing, maybe not a lack of a passing game, but that passing game maybe not living up to what we expected coming into this year? Lack of receivers, maybe not as dynamic a tight end. Is that what's holding them back in your eyes?
I think that they've had some D-line injuries, so if they're a little healthier, is that different against Alabama? You also wonder, they won 2 national titles in a row. It's really hard to not have, some complacency set in, the expectations, or maybe it should happen, not the why it happens for the younger kids in the program. Is the off the field stuff starting to hurt them a little bit, chip at them just a little bit? I think we're going to find out Saturday. I think it may be a combination of all of that.
I'm with you. I'm buying Alabama. I think I'm selling Georgia just for that exact reason. Before we get to Texas, Ole Miss, the last one I wanted to ask about. A lot of good work done in the portal and the trenches, and so far it appears to be showing off. However, they've yet to be tested.
Yeah, I'm buying them too. So I'm buying 4 teams right now, and they'll have to play it out that I think really have a shot. And obviously, if Georgia beats Bama, then those 2 flip. But I do like Ole Miss because they have a third-year starting quarterback with the same play caller, with the same head coach. And they have really good wideouts. They have the pieces around him is what they have. And then their defensive line is better this year. How much better? Are they the Tennessee, Georgia level, maybe the level we think Texas is right now? We're about to find out. But I am buying Ole Miss because of that quarterback and offensive coordinator continuity and play caller in Lane Kiffin.
It does feel a bit weird to put chips back in the Ole Miss basket. It hasn't gone well over the last couple of years when they've felt legit, but I'm with you. I think Ole Miss might be the actual second best team in this conference at the moment, which leads me to Texas. And I'm assuming, given the 4 teams that you wanted to buy earlier, Texas is one of them with Quinn Ewers fully back. What's the path?
Yeah, I'm buying Texas. I mean, look, I think I had them at 10-2 because on our prediction show, I'd said 10-2 and I wasn't going to back off of it. I've moved that to 11-1 since they beat Michigan. Look, I think the main thing here, you have to beat your rival, Oklahoma, in 2 weeks. That's obvious. Sark doesn't want to be 1-3. If you do that, you can drop a game, and I still think you're going to end up in the SEC championship. So I am buying Texas, and at this point, I'll be surprised if they're not in the SEC championship game. And I don't know the 78 pages of tiebreakers, CJ, but I don't know that. I don't think we'll have 3 teams with 1 loss in the league, though, either.
There is a possibility that 6 teams with 1 loss end up, tied for the top. But hey, we'll let the tiebreaker decisions and everything play itself out. Real quick, and before we wrap things up, either or. I think we're kind of in that stage right now where one team's trending up, maybe one team's trending down. Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Who has the better year?
A&M. I think A&M's got an easier schedule, first of all. I think if they played the same schedule, I might say it's a push. But I think Oklahoma's got a better defense than A&M. But with Marcel Reed, I think A&M may have a better offense. I think their offensive line's outperforming Oklahoma's, which is kind of a big story when you just look at those 2 teams before the season. Because most people would not have said A&M's offensive line would outperform Oklahoma's just because of Bedenbaugh's history, but they clearly are better than Oklahoma's offensive line, who's probably bottom third in the league right now, whether that's injury or they're just not very good. So either or, I'm taking A&M, and because I still think Oklahoma, if they don't win this weekend, they may go 5-7.
Yeah, they might be in for a world of hurt, after this weekend. And losing at Auburn, not something that I think anybody from Norman had on their bingo card before this season.
What do you have on that one, TJ?
What's that?
You have A&M as well?
I think so, but we've seen the wheels fall off in A&M, year after year after year. I want to, history tells me OU's the safer bet, but I can't trust what's going on at quarterback, and that offensive line is so inconsistent. I don't know. I think I have to lean A&M because of, at least you've seen 2 games of Marcel Reed, so We'll see. But that'll do it today and for this week's edition of Texas versus the SEC. Jerry, thank you very much for joining us. And, of course, come find more at ontexasfootball.com. Texas, Mississippi State, 3:15 kickoff, and we'll have all of it here for you covered on Texas Football.